Just a little bit. Let's see. Move closer to you too.
Just move the cup out the way so I can see your face.
How about you? There you go. I'm partially out of it. I'll move this out of the way here. Instagram on?
Yeah.
All right, we're live. Hey, Starr-Brianna.
Hi.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for gifting yourself this time to join us here today on Ask the Talk Doctor Live. It is Friday once again. Yay! Happy you took the time to join. Happy Friday, everyone. So we are live here today for another episode 9, actually, of Ask the Talk Doctor Live. And we were gone for the last 2 weeks or so. We posted about an unfortunate loss, and we had to just take some time to take care of ourselves through this process. So our show today is really fitting. The topic is coping with grief and loss. And before we get into it, we want to do our normal introductions and really tell you who we are and why we're here. As I said before, this is Ask the Talk Doctor Live. This is a weekly podcast show that airs every Friday at noon Eastern Standard Time, where we give you an opportunity to just join us and just be in the moment. We are so busy in life today. We hustle around. We have so much going on that to just have a space to decompress, process things, and come on the show and ask your questions live. Any topic, whether it be mental health, whether it be something that is happening in life, work, whatever the case may be, we want to be a resource to you. And for those of you who are, just our regular viewers, we just want to thank you because it's been just really awesome hearing your feedback and just having you here with us each and every week. So my name is Dr. Dacia Hastings. I am a psychotherapist, speaker, consultant, and life coach. And my beautiful co-host, who happens to also be my lovely daughter, Starr-Brianna, is going to tell you a little bit about herself.
So thank you. Yes, like the Talk Doctor mentioned, we've been gone for about 2 weeks. We did have a loss. A little bit about me. I'm Starr-Brianna. I'm a creative director, content creator, social media strategist, a mixture of all the things.
Yeah. And a lovely job you do.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't do some of this, broadcasting without her because, her mom is technologically challenged in many ways. But yeah, and you've been just so gracious to just hang in there with us, despite the many hiccups that we can have from time to time. But I am so, so grateful for this platform, to just have an opportunity to be able to be here with many of you who have, shared with me your own struggles with loss. And, now I am face to face with a very significant loss that is. If you've been paying attention to our social media, I lost my father, Star's grandfather, unfortunately, on January 26th at 11:22 a.m. And my heart is broken. And so I thought that it would be so very important as part of the process of just processing my grief to be able to help others, just to talk about how real the struggle can be. And it certainly is a real struggle. So I hope that we can get through this episode without crying. I've certainly done a whole lot of that, but I think that it is so very important, as I said, that we share our emotions, we share our grief, we talk about what that feels like, as well as to be able to help many of you out there who are probably coping with grief and loss yourself. So I want to start off by just telling you a little bit about my dear old dad, who, we lost on January 26th. And I want to give Star an opportunity first, because she has, some fond memories of her grandfather when she was much little. We're from the USVI, St. Croix to be exact. And she spent a lot of time with her grandfather during summer breaks. And what do you remember being your fondest childhood memories of your grandfather?
I have a lot. As I was thinking, as we were preparing for the show, and I would have to say my fondest memory of him. So he would often take me for drives. Specifically, I'd go to work with him very often. And as a child, it's so hot in the Virgin Islands in St. Croix. So we'd be in his pickup truck, windows down, all the way down, because we need the air. But he kind of just like, well, he'd kind of just like leave me in the car. But this wasn't a bad thing. Like, I'd be right there. He's cleaning pools. Like, he's a hardworking man. He's the hardest working man ever. He's cleaning the pools. I'd be there on the site. Literally, the pool's right here. I'm right here. He's not leaving me all the way down the street. I'd really be there with him. But it'd be so hot, and he didn't want me to be like running around jumping in the pools, because this is other people's property. So I understand now, but it would be so hot. But I was grateful for that, and now even in this moment, I'm grateful for it, because I got to see firsthand how hard he worked. And he didn't just work on cleaning pools. Like, I'm sure my mother will mention all the things that he worked hard doing, but this is the one thing that I got to witness, and went to so many different job sites with him. And he really took time to make sure the pool was sparkling clean. Like, he was so driven, so dedicated, so determined. He loved to just build and to just make things beautiful, make things happen with his hands, though, with his bare hands. Yeah. So that's a beautiful just memory of him, just how strong he was, and just how much of a builder he is. He was.
Yeah, I love that you remember that. I remember you would always share that, and you would always also share about, how he would teach you how to open the coconut with a machete, and the coconut water. If you've ever been to the islands, and you've had an actual coconut, not these manufactured ones that they sell in the can, but the actual organic coconut. And just being able to drink that, and how refreshing it is, and then to eat the fruit from the middle that we call jelly, just these things. And he would always, just from me being a child, and then to his grandchildren, sharing this kind of stuff, it warms your heart. And a lot of times when we go through a loss, and we can just focus on those intricate moments that we remember about the person that, we loved, and that they're gone. And I too have some fond memories. Starr-Brianna is actually right. My father was a very hard worker. He worked with his hands. He was a very creative person. He could build. He was creative in, landscaping, the latter part of his life, which is what she was also talking about, after he retired from his profession as a chef. And I'll tell you about that in a moment. What an amazing chef he was. But after he retired, from his profession as a chef, he started his own landscaping and pool cleaning business, because he was just always so driven that one of his philosophy was the body has to keep moving. And if the body isn't moving, then you're dead.
And you get lazy, your bones start to get weak.
Yeah, and he's so right. He's absolutely right. And that's one of the things that, just kept him going, because when I remember a lot about him, my father was really wellness oriented. And I love that he passed that on, because I'm so passionate about wellness today. Even as a young boy, he lifted weights. As a young girl, I remember him changing his whole diet, and he wouldn't eat any meat at all. He just focused on fish and plant-based food. Everything he grew, he ate, or things that came organically from the ground. And just watching him take care of himself in that way, which is why the latter part was so hard, watching him decline, because here's a man who really believed in natural stuff and in natural healing. And he, again, really didn't really ascribe much to healthcare or modern medicine, but believed that the body could heal itself. And I too really feel that way. If you take care of your body, it's going to take care of you. So when he got sick, that was hard for all of us. There are 5 of us, 5 girls that he has, and over 12 or 13, 11 grandchildren. And so one of the things that I think he passed on was his love for wellness, and also his gift of cooking. His amazing cooking skill that I so appreciate today. And I'm so glad that I got that gift from him.
I appreciate it too.
Yeah, my family appreciates the amazing cooked food. And I would always talk about how my father would prepare these just delicious meals, especially during Thanksgiving time. He didn't cook much at home because that was his profession. But when he did, it was such a treat for us. So it's just so wonderful to be able to give you guys a little bit of insight of the amazing man that we lost, and to really dedicate this show today in his honor, and just to speak fondly of him, because for so many of you out there, I'm pretty sure, if you've lost people close to you before, how important it is for you to really honor them in a great way, and to just talk, fondly of them.
About them, to keep them alive.
Yeah, absolutely. You who are still here have to really carry on, the amazing legacy. So I want to be able to talk about the grief process, because that's what we asked you to come on today for, to just be able to be here and, talk about grief. And for those of you who are here today, don't forget to post your questions. You can share your questions in the chat. If there's something that you want to comment, even share with us about a fond memory you have about somebody that you lost, because I think that that's also important as well as we process through, our own grief. But let's talk a little bit about the grief and loss process. And before we get into that, I want to ask you, Starr-Brianna, how do you cope with a loss of this magnitude? Particularly maybe for those people out there who have a loss or have been experiencing a loss, but they're already dealing with mental health issues, i.e. depression and anxiety, coupled with grief.
Yeah, it's important that you brought that up and mentioned that. Not funny, but funny. So the funeral, that I like to call it a celebration. It was a celebration.
Celebration of life.
It was the most beautiful, beautiful event. I still just can't even believe that, because this is probably the closest person to me that I've ever lost in my life. So it's interesting, the process, especially like you mentioned, dealing with mental health issues. So you're already kind of in a space, and then grief is a whole other space. And now you have both of the spaces, and you want to hold a space, a significant space for the person that you lost. And how can you do that when you already feel so full? So what I said was funny, quote unquote, celebration was in Florida. Florida has beautiful beaches. Luckily, the part where we were was near a beach. And I got a chance to spend a few moments alone, just kind of laying out on the sand. And I felt just like, I'm just thinking about Grandpa, and I'm like, wow, like I really want to be able to feel what's happening here and fully process it. And I know it can't just happen in a day or even 2 weeks, but I want to be able to process it. But I have all this other stuff, so like, it's just, I guess you have to break through some of it to process it, because that's a big thing. This person, let's face it, will never be here on this earth again as we know it. So that's something you have to process. You have to relive those memories and realize that this just happened. Like, you just saw your grandpa alive, and then now he's a spirit now, and now he, and I don't know, as I was just laying there, I was just like, how am I going to do this? I guess I'm still in the how am I going to do this stage. It's not figured out. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I still have it's just a lot of things,
Yes. It's a lot in your head.
Yeah.
And I like how you talk about just being full, because I think you're absolutely right that, a lot of times when you're already in a space or dealing with, mental health concerns, your head can be really full. And then comes, a loss. And it's another thing on top of it that you have to deal with. And interestingly, she talked about being in a state or in a stage. And I want to present to you, those of you, because it's important for you to understand how the stages of grief and loss work in that space of processing. If you don't understand these stages, you're going to feel like, gosh, something is wrong with me. I'm going through this thing and I don't know why I'm here. But I will tell you that there is normalcy to the process and those stages of grief and loss. So there are 5, according to an author that has written very largely on this, and her name is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Whenever I have patients that come to me for grief and loss, I always refer to her writing because she is one of the pioneers in grief and loss. And, some of her later writings she's done collaboration with another author, David Kessler. So in their writings, they talk about the 5 stages of grief and loss. They are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I'll briefly talk about each one, because when I hear you talk about being in this space and laying on the beach and saying, wow, I'm never going to, physically see this person again, that is where a lot of people get stuck. So in the denial stage, it doesn't just happen in the immediate sense when the person dies. Of course, you go through that immediate shock. And just a little bit of disclosure for us, we were grateful to be able to watch my father transition. And for some of you, that might be like, whoa, I don't know if I could go through that. And of course, to each his own, but I wanted to be there, albeit in front of a screen, video, i.e. COVID. We weren't able to hold his hand and watch him transition, but grateful nevertheless that we got an opportunity to be there. And it was painful. It was hard watching and hearing that final moment when they said he's gone. And so, for me, that is something that just stays in my mind. And as you process, you're in shock. It's happening, but it's shocking nonetheless. And even after days could pass by, and you still, like, I still can't believe that just happened. No, he's going to wake up. No. And so that's the shock and the denial. And unfortunately, some people find themselves in that space for weeks, right? So then comes maybe the anger. And you start kind of reconciling with yourself because you realize you're not seeing that person. What you're asking for is not happening. The shock is not going away. So you start feeling angry. And most people go through that stage. They're angry for various things. And you could have been dealing with anger already. It surmounts that emotion even more.
You start acting out.
You start a whole host of things. And especially if you have a teenager and you see them start acting out, because a lot of times that's how teenagers deal with emotions. They'll choose an emotion and they'll act upon it. So you may have a teenager that's struggling with a grief and loss issue, and they've already been, in a state of anger. It just becomes like a combustible explosion at times.
And I want to just remind everyone that the word anger is such a just like strong word. I want to just break down anger. So if you are dealing with a teenager or whoever, because everyone can get angry,
of course,
it's really just a bunch of built up sadness.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to work with your child or work with your aunt, work with your friend, remember that they're deeply hurting inside to make them this angry,
Right.
So I just want to remind, so we can be more compassionate when we see anger.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because people do one of two things. They either implode or explode, but it's an emotion nonetheless. The reason anger gets such a bad rap is because of how it's displayed. But anger is an acceptable emotion. I can tell you, Starr-Brianna, I'm angry because of XYZ, but I don't have to break things around me, but that's how some people express it. So then there's the anger. And then some people go through the third stage of bargaining. This is where you find yourself in this state. Maybe you might be praying, Lord, if you let my loved one live, or if you let this not be true when I wake up in the morning, or I'll be the best I can possibly be, for the rest of my life. I won't say a curse word anymore, or whatever the case may be. So you go through this stage of bargaining because you feel like in your mind, if I'm the best I can be, or if I rationalize this in such a way as I'm bargaining for something, my loved one will come back. Yes. And that's a real feeling for some people as well. And perhaps you found yourself going through that as you're dealing with it.
I think that might be, and none are better than the other in the 5 stages, but I want to say that might hurt the most, because once you finish your bargaining and then it doesn't happen, it's like you can go all the way back to step 1.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad she said that, because as I'm going through this for the purpose of teaching, these are not as clean as they sound. People go in and out of these stages because it's a process. And people go in and out of these stages, and you can be a year, 2 years, and you're still going in and out of these stages until you get to the final one. And the final one is hard for a lot of people in the beginning, because when we talk about it and we say until you get to a space of acceptance, some people will say, well, I will never accept this. This is something that I will never accept. Again, the anger coming out. Don't say that. I'm never going to accept this. This is not fair. Those kinds of things. But what I will say to you as I jump forward to acceptance, I skipped over depression and I'll come back to that. Acceptance doesn't necessarily mean accepting. It can be that you have resolve, or you have some sort of resolution inside of you, i.e. a sense of peace. And sometimes that's all we need to make peace with the loss. It doesn't mean that you have forgotten about the person that you love. It doesn't mean that you will never have feelings for that person anymore. It just means that sometime you will get to a space where you make peace with it. And that's what acceptance truly looks like. But I like how Starr-Brianna said that, you go in and out because this is a process. You're processing through this. And don't let anybody tell you, a year from now, maybe your loved one was gone, a year, 2 years, you're still grieving. There's no timeline on our grief. It is what it is, and we go through it and we face what we face in our own time. I think that to speak from a clinical perspective, however, there are certain things that you need to watch for. That there's normal grief, but there's also an abnormality that comes along with it. And what I mean by that is when you get to the stage of depression, it looks like sadness. It looks like feeling hopeless about it. It looks like just feeling the pain so deeply that you find yourself crying a lot, bursting out in tears in inappropriate places, those kinds of things. But the thing that you need to understand from a clinical perspective, that when you're going through these normal stages, you're going to find yourself going in and out of them. But if these symptoms are prolonged, then it might be time for you to really say, perhaps I need to process my grief with a professional, because it can really turn into a major depressive episode if you're not giving yourself the space of processing this in a normal way. And I want to emphasize that there is nothing wrong with seeking help to help you go through the grief process. In fact, I highly recommend processing your grief with a professional. I tell people all the time, do not delay your grief. The longer you delay it, and I've certainly had some patients over the years who've come 2 years later and said, I never really dealt with the loss of my mom. I never really dealt with the loss of my dad or my husband or my spouse or whoever it is. Because sometimes we push back the pain because we're just not ready to face it. But what that looks like later on is that you have a whole host of other things that have happened in that 2 years. And now you're dealing with so much more, and it is triggered by that grief, unfortunately. Yeah. So really be wary of these stages. Know that they are completely normal, but also know when you have gotten to the place where I do need to seek professional help to help me process my grief.
Exactly.
Yeah. So again, denial, shock, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Those are the 5 stages of grief and loss. Wherever you might find yourself today, just know that help is available if you need it. Don't deny yourself the ability to process with a counselor or a coach, somebody licensed that can really help you through this process, because let's face it, grief is painful.
It is.
And it hurts.
It does.
Yes, indeed. And so, how about we talk about some ways to cope? I like how you said, lucky for us, he was in an area that was a beach area. And, because we're from the islands, we go, our go-to is normally water. We love the beach. For me, that's where I can feel more connected to myself, to the earth, through the spirit, all of those things when I'm near water. And that was so important. So tell us some of the things that came up for you as you just allowed yourself to be enveloped by the ocean, and you were just going through what you were feeling about losing your grandfather.
Yeah, I'd like to elaborate on the beach. I love the beach also, especially immersing myself in the water. Like I mentioned earlier, just feeling like it's so full in my brain. Something about being underneath the water, like your whole body just underneath there. It's like everything is being drowned out. You can't really hear. Maybe you hear just faint noises, but you can't hear what anybody's saying, what yourself is thinking sometimes either. You're just fully just connecting with God. You're just fully just connecting. I love to immerse myself in the water. Also, just like if I need to, journaling. I love to journal. Sometimes when things get so heavy, though, you don't even feel like picking up your pen to write. So if it's that way, then you just kind of speak out loud. Just let it out, whatever you're feeling. Just talk. Sometimes you don't even want to talk, so you just lay down and just kind of surrender it. But there's just different steps for different people, and whatever I say, whatever anybody says, it's kind of like you have to find your own thing. Yes, work with someone to find your thing if you don't know how to find your thing, but don't just take whatever somebody else says. You have to know like what's going to help you.
You're right. Yes, different methods for different people, and we are all unique in that. I think the ocean is an anchor for you. The ocean is an anchor for me. And an anchor just simply means something that you can focus on to really help you come face to face with this pain that I feel is real. And I've got to face it head on. I can't push it back, because pushing it back just means that it's going to show up in a different place in my life. So the sooner you can get in there and process your grief, the better. For me, it was also walking on the beach. And you mentioned, sometimes not being able to write. I remember the day after the service, my head felt so full of emotions that I just needed to get away from everything and everyone. And the ocean is so healing. Just listening to the waves and walking on the beach by myself, I pulled out my phone and I started an audio journal. And I just started talking. I started talking about, the pain I felt. I started talking about the memories I had. I started talking about what I didn't understand about death and dying. But I also started allowing myself to talk about the hope that I had, and for me, being a very spiritual person, that helps me with grief as well, because I can look to my faith and I can look to hope that one day I'll see my father again, because that's what my faith tells me. My faith also tells me that he's always with me in the spirit. For me, that was so comforting, that I needed that in that moment. So I started talking to my dad from a spiritual perspective and just thanking him for everything that he had done and everything that he had represented in my life. And for me, that was the thing that helped me the day after the service to reconcile a lot of the pain. And I know it's not over. As we talked about these 5 stages, it is going to be a process. I may find myself, who knows, next week back in that shock denial stage again. Or I might feel sad in moments when I'm helping a patient process their grief and reminding me of, my father being gone. Who knows? But the point is, you absolutely have to face that pain, because if you do not, it can have dire consequences for your mental health.
Yeah.
So here are a few tips that we want to share with you before we get into the questions. So we'll go back and forth with them. I said it before, I'm going to say it again. Process your grief as soon as possible, whether it's writing, whether it's sitting down with a professional, whether it's using an audio memo and just talking about your emotions, whether it's talking to a trusted friend or somebody who has gone through the same or similar situation that can offer you some support. It can be positive affirmations on a day-to-day basis, affirming you as a person and reminding you to be grounded and anchored in something. The other part of it is allowing yourself the time. Don't let anybody put your grief on a schedule. Allow yourself the time to go through this in a normal process, in a healthy way. And again, if you find that you are in a space that you just feel stuck, it's okay to seek out the help of someone else. Yeah.
Another one would be realize your grief can trigger other emotions, whether suppressed or buried. So that kind of goes back to whatever you were feeling prior to the loss happening. An immediate just trigger of other things, or even what you said, as you're counseling your patients and they mention something, and then it can trigger many different things in you.
Yeah.
So I think allowing yourself the time and processing your grief just as it happens can help with those triggers. But let's face it, triggers happen anytime, any place, but it can definitely just help.
Yes.
And we need just help. We need it to be a little bit less so we can still carry out our day-to-day lives, because this is heavy and this hurts.
Absolutely. And I like that you mentioned carry out your day-to-day life, because there's such a thing called compartmentalization that sometimes, you may be in a meeting and all of a sudden you feel the pain, coming, and you feel like you're about to burst into tears, that it's okay to excuse yourself, get yourself together, but recognize that, yes, I feel this pain right now. I'm at work and I have to figure out a way to get through this day. So being able to compartmentalize is very important as you go through the grief process. And that's one of the things that you will learn in counseling as well, how to be able to put those pieces, in their own compartments, giving yourself the time and space you need to cry, to write, so that when you do show up at work or when you do show up in life, you're not really kind of having all the emotions just all over the place in one basket.
I want to say, and as we're saying the word compartmentalize, I'm thinking of just mini containers, and you just kind of push them into like bins into a file cabinet. But be sure to empty those bins out. Don't keep on piling it, piling those emotions into the bin, because that compartment can explode also. And that's another thing that we do sometimes. We just keep going. So good that you clarified that, because compartmentalization doesn't necessarily mean that you don't go back and deal with the things that are in those bins that you mentioned. Yes. And we talked often about seeking support and talking to a professional. Support might look different for you. So whether it's a grief group, or whether it's a trusted friend, somebody who's gone through it before. And then again, if you feel like it got to that space that this is necessary, give yourself permission to talk to a professional that can really help you through these stages and this process. And maybe even as you're going through your grief, you just don't even have it in you. Just you have to find the professional. You have to sometimes go through a list or something. You probably don't even feel like doing that. So that goes back to just community, or just having a friend, or having someone trusted. Maybe have this person help you find somebody, so that it takes the weight off of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we hope these stages of grief and loss have been helpful. Again, put your comments or your questions in the chat. We're going to switch off a little bit because, we could spend all day just talking about this, but we realize we have limited time on this platform, and we know that this is a heavy subject. So thank you guys for staying in here with us today and really hearing the message that we're sending to you as it relates to grief and loss. So this is a segment where we go into questions and answers, and we're going to try to do as many as we can. I'm looking at my phone here because someone texted me a question, so I want to be mindful of that, and I want to be able to answer their question as well. Remember that we ask you to also pre-send your questions, so you can send your questions to askthetalkdrlive@gmail.com. It's a confidential inbox where we receive your questions ahead of time, and who knows, you might hear it air on, live, but you can also post your questions in the comment box or in the chat if that is something that you want to do as well. And we try to make this a safe space for you to be able to do that. So not to worry, all of this is confidential. So I got a question from somebody that they shared with me, and ironically, it's fitting to today's topic. So that person wanted to know, how does one cope after losing a loved one who died by suicide? That's a heavy one. That's a really heavy one. So suicide is final, right? And it too is painful. So you're dealing with two things here. You're dealing with the fact that that person took their own life, but you're also dealing with the fact that they're gone. And so one of the symptoms of depression or mental health challenges, the unfortunate consequence of not dealing with a mental health challenge in a normal, healthy way, or continuing to receive the support, it can sometimes unfortunately lead to suicide. And if you've ever gone through losing a loved one, as this person has, it can be quite painful. It can be where you go through these stages that we just talked about, but you find yourself stuck in the space of why. Asking the question why over and over again. And that's when you're kind of stuck. You're stuck in that space. Could I have seen this? Could I have helped this person? Could I have done something differently? If I was just there more, if I only saw the signs, and on and on and on. And so you're dealing with the fact that I have this pain of losing my loved one, but I'm also trying to process why this person took their life, in that manner. And were you going to say something?
You can finish.
Okay. And so asking the question of how do I deal with it, it goes through a similar thing like we were just sharing before, that you have to give yourself the opportunity, first and foremost, to not self-blame, because we can find ourselves doing that. And self-blame is hurtful. It's not helpful. It's not, unfortunately, going to bring the person back. And unfortunately, you may never get those answers that you're asking. Remember, mental health challenges is an individual thing. And I get a lot from people that say to me that I'm dealing with a loved one who is suffering from depression or anxiety, and I don't know how to help them. The number one thing, and we had a show, we dedicated an episode to this, so maybe go back and watch, was it episode 7 or episode 8 on, supporting a loved one through depression? Remember that that's your role, that's your job, and that's all you can do is be supportive. You cannot process that person's emotions for them. You cannot be the one to literally take that person to therapy and sit them in front of a professional. You cannot be the one to take that person's medication for them. You can't do any of those things. And as hard as it might be, that is an individual thing. You can be there to support the person, to provide guidance, to let them know I'm here. How can I help you? All of those things become necessary. But at the end of the day, this is a walk that they walk alone. And suicide for a lot of people is a choice, albeit final. And so sometimes, even as a professional, with our best intentions, doing the best that we can, somebody still completes suicide, and that's tough. So what I would say to you, the person who sent this question in, you got to manage you. You got to take care of you. This is a point in time where you got to reconcile this for yourself. Go through the grief process, but forgive yourself for the things that you feel like you're blaming yourself for, but also recognize that that person's mental health challenges were their own, and it is no fault of your own. And that's how you get out of being stuck.
Yeah. I like that you said even if this person was in, counseling for, they could have been in there for years, and then they still complete the suicide, action. I want to just say to have compassion for yourself, not to self-blame, like you said, but you have to give yourself that compassion. And then look to them. They're gone now, but gain understanding for what they were dealing with. Like, even sometimes people will leave like letters to their family before it happens, or people always leave footprints from where they've been. Gain understandings, trace back those steps so that you can give yourself compassion, but you're also understanding where their head was, why they did this, even if the footprints are hard to find, they're there. Who were they around? Even if they isolated themselves for some time, there's somebody that knew them. There's some place that they were. You can find that place, and you really, the two key words are understanding for them and compassion for yourself. Yes. And that's how you move forward with the suicide of your loved one.
Good. Yeah. I like that. I really do like that. I love that self-compassion. And we did a show on self-compassion as well. One of the things that we find it so easy to give to other people is compassion, and it's hard to give it to ourselves. So we need to turn that inward and just be a little bit more caring. Allow yourself to treat yourself with kid gloves, especially when you're going through something as heavy and painful as a loss. Yes, indeed. I love that, Starr-Brianna. So unfortunately, we are running short on time. I really think that we need to make this segment longer because we could just like banter back and forth for a long time. And before we know it, the 30 minutes is up. But you really held on, and we thank you so much for hanging in there with us and sticking this out. And, tell your friends about this platform if you find it really helpful. Remember to subscribe to our channel. When you do that, it helps other people be able to view these episodes and gain, some support from it. And that's what we're really here for. We're really here to offer our support and our guidance. So we're going to take some more questions. If questions come into the chat, of course, we're going to take them. But our other pre-questions that we got, next week we'll try to deal with some more questions. But thank you to that person who sent in the question about suicide. And, do you want to say some final things before I give the closing?
Not so much a thought, more of an action. I want to let's hold space for grandpa right now, and you watching, hold space for somebody that you might be grieving, even if it's not fully a death. Maybe it's somebody that you were in a relationship with, or the friend that you're not friends with. They're all grief. So let's hold space for a few seconds and just
so
remember.
A moment of silence, maybe, right? Yeah. I put these beautiful flowers up here on the table because one of my lovely friends sent them, the week that my dad passed, and I still hold on to them. They're still blooming fresh and lovely, and we got so many wonderful cards and well wishes. So we wanted to be able to show how much grandpa, my dad is loved.
Your dad.
Yes.
Your
and
dad.
So, it's just so amazing to be able to have this. So these give me comfort when I look at the things that friends and well-wishers sent in, and, many of our friends who just showed up and helped out in ways unimaginable. And I want to publicly thank all of you for just being here for us and just showing us your love and your support. So yes, a moment of silence to hold that space. I love that so much. And have a moment of silence with us too. Okay, thank you for being here with us. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for just allowing yourself this time to share with us. And in closing, I want to share with you this thought by an anonymous writer. It says, "Be the things you love the most about the people who are gone." And for me, that really means that, I am able to take a piece of what my father left me and carry on his legacy. For you, that might look a little bit different. But I think that when we take the good and, the powerful pieces that our ancestors and our loved ones and our friends who have gone on before, and we let those things shine through us, it's so amazing, and it's such an honorable way of just being able to carry on the legacy of somebody who deserves to be able to be remembered in the best way possible. My daddy had quiet strength, calm in the middle of a storm, never let anything bother him, and I much appreciated that about him. He was also caring, and he would give his friends the shirt off of his back. When I think of what I want to exemplify most, it would be his ability to just let it ride. Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. Let things roll off your back. And for me, just being able to exemplify that and exemplify that kind of patience and learn how to be more quiet and just think things through, allow things to not ruffle your feathers as much. Because at the end of the day, when you really think about it, what does it all matter? How big is it really in the grand scheme of things? So that's one of the things that I'll always remember. That's one of the things that I aspire to be. Being the talk doctor, I do a lot of talking, but I also do a lot of listening. And for me, I want to listen more. My dad was a man of few words. And so for me, taking that on from him and listening more is going to be exceptional, not just for the other people on the receiving end, but also for my health and my mental health, to just allow myself to be more peaceful. Rest in peace, my dear daddy.
I love you, Grandpa.
See you later. Thanks for watching.